In the final years of World War II, as the tides of conflict turned decisively against Japan, the Imperial Navy began pursuing an audacious Plan 1, so bold, so technologically advanced, and so deeply confidential, that even many senior officers had never heard of it. It was a weapon that defied conventional logic. A vessel conceived not merely to fight battles, but to redefine naval warfare itself. That weapon was the Sentoku I-400 Submarine Colossal, secret underwater aircraft carrier capable of launching long-range bombers from beneath the waves. Nothing like it had ever existed before, and nothing like it would exist again for decades. Most of the world would not learn of this submarine until after the war. Many historians overlooked it. Engineers dismissed it as impossible. PAL and military analysts could hardly believe that such a machine had been built using 1940s technology. But it was real. And the idea emerged from one man, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. The mastermind behind Pearl Harbor believed that Japan's only hope for long-term strategic success was to strike enemies far beyond their expectation, hit them in places they believed unreachable. Yamamoto envisioned a weapon that could attack the American mainland, destroy infrastructure, disrupt morale, and force the U.S. to divert forces away from the Pacific. His solution was radical: a submarine that could sail around the world without surfacing, approach enemy coasts undetected, launch bombers capable of delivering high explosive or biological payloads, bend, disappear beneath the ocean before the enemy even realized where the attack came from. No navy had ever attempted such a vessel, but Japan's naval engineers did. Work on the I-400 class began in extreme secrecy. Engineers were sworn to silence. Workers were monitored. Shipyards carved out restricted zones. The project became so compartmentalized that even high-ranking officers were unaware of its existence. When the first I-400 slid into the water in 1944, the world had already entered the final act of the war. Japan's industrial capacity was waning, resources were collapsing, and Allied bombardment had crippled critical infrastructure. Yet, against all logic, the country produced the largest submarines ever built until the Cold War. The I-400 was longer than a football field and displaced over 6,500 tons underwater, more than double the tonnage of any submarine in the world at the time. It carried enough fuel to circumnavigate the globe 1.5 times. It could carry 3 Seiran clear sky storm attack aircraft in a sealed, climate-controlled hangar on its deck, and it could launch them in minutes through a steam catapult system adapted from aircraft carriers. This was not merely a submarine. It was a global strike platform decades ahead of its time. Yet the I-400 was not designed to sink ships or engage enemy submarines. Its mission was more symbolic and devastating: to strike the U.S. mainland itself. Early plans called for attacks on New York City, Panama's canal locks, or American naval facilities along the West Coast. Had the I-400 succeeded, the psychological impact on the American public, already weary from years of war, could have been immense. The U.S. believed the Pacific Ocean protected it. The I-400 was designed to break that belief. But as the submarine quietly prepared for its first mission, the war shifted. Japan's resources dwindled further. Command structures fractured. Communication lines broke down. And ultimately, the I-400 would be deployed on a very different mission than Yamamoto intended. Yet the secrecy surrounding this submarine meant the Allies never saw it coming. They had no idea such a vessel existed, and they had no defense prepared for it. But fate and timing would decide that the I-400's most ambitious attack would never be carried out. For still, the story of its construction, deployment, and disappearance into classified archives remains one of the most unseen episodes of World War II naval history. This is that story. Japan's decision to construct the I-400 submarine emerged from desperation, ambition, and a remarkable belief in technological innovation. As the war progressed, Japan had lost the ability to project power across the Pacific in traditional ways. Aircraft carriers had been sunk, fuel was scarce, battleships were obsolete against carrier strike groups. The nation needed a new asymmetric weapon. The I-400 program code-named Sentoku's Special Submarine became that weapon. Construction began at Kure Naval Arsenal in 1942, and from the outset, engineers faced challenges no navy had ever confronted. They were tasked with designing a submarine that could travel 37,000 nautical miles without refueling, carry 3 full-sized attack aircraft, launch those aircraft at sea house over 150 crew, submerge for extended periods, evade Allied detections, survive long-range missions alone. These requirements demanded solutions bordering on science fiction. Engineering marvels, the I-400 featured a double-hull constructionist, essential for its enormous size and a cross-section that allowed a cylindrical aircraft hangar to rest atop the main pressure hull. This hangar-sealing aircraft from saltwater corrosion was 115 feet long and 12 feet wide. A massive hydraulic door protected the aircraft inside. The vessel also included sun snorkel systems for underwater diesel operation, a watertight catapult for aircraft launches, but a uni-twin 140 mm deck guns, torpedo tubes for defensive operations. The crew quarters were cramped but efficient. Officers and pilots slept in slightly larger compartments near the hangar, while engineers and sailors lived in tight bunks deep within the hull. The Seiran aircraft, the submarine, existed to carry one thing: the IHE M6A-1 Seiran, a cutting-edge floatplane bomber designed specifically for the I-400 program. The Seiran could fly at 295 miles per hour, carry an 800 kg bomb or torpedo, travel over 600 miles, be launched in under 15 minutes, have wings and tail folded to fit the hangar for faster deployment. The float attachments could be removed for one-way suicide missions, option Japan seriously considered late in the war. The Seiran was so carefully engineered that American intelligence never learned of its existence until after the war. A global strike submarine before the world was ready once completed. The I-400 became the largest and most advanced submarine on Earth. The Allies had nothing like it. Their submarines carried torpedoes, not aircraft hangars. The United States Navy, despite its technological superiority, would not field a submarine of comparable size until the ballistic missile subs of the 1960s. Japan intended to build 18 I-400 class submarines. Only 3 were completed before the war ended: I-400, I-401, and I-402B, because Allied bombing repeatedly disrupted production. Still, even 3 represented a threat that could change strategic calculations. But by the time the submarines were ready, Japan's military command was fractured, fuel was scarce, and long-range operations became nearly impossible. Yet the Imperial Navy pressed forward. The I-400 and its sister boats were assigned one final, daring mission. And had events unfolded even slightly differently, it might have. Yamamoto's original plan was to strike the continental United States. Early concepts included bombing San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Diego, even the East Coast, via circumnavigation. But as Japan's situation deteriorated, ambitions were scaled back. By mid-1944, Japan's naval leadership settled on a different target: the Panama Canal. Specifically, the massive locks at Gat. Destroying the locks would drain the canal, trapping American ships in the Atlantic or Pacific for up to a year. This would have dramatically slowed U.S. logistics, hampered troop movements, and potentially delayed operations in Europe or the Pacific. Japan saw the Panama attack as a way to force the U.S. to divert resources, buying Japan precious time. The plan, codenamed Operation Arashi, was audacious. The I-400 fleet would sail east across the Pacific, avoiding American patrol zones. Once near Central America, the submarines would surface at night. The Seiran aircraft would be assembled on deck. Pilots would fly low over the water, cross the jungle canopy, and strike the Gatun locks. After release, the planes would ditch near prearranged coordinates for rescue, later changed to suicide runs. The submarines would submerge and escape into the deep Pacific. The attack had a real chance of success. American defenses in Panama were not prepared for long-range submarine-launched aircraft. In fact, U.S. intelligence believed Japan lacked the capability for any such mission. They were wrong. Training begins. The I-400 fleet secretly trained in the Sea of Japan, practicing aircraft deployment, night operations, and rapid catapult launches. Crews shaved minutes off assembly times. Pilots drilled low-latitude approaches. Engineers practiced resurfacing drills in rough weather. Japan believed the mission could succeed. They believed it might alter the war's outcome more, at least delay defeat long enough for political negotiations. But as preparations neared completion, global events shifted dramatically. The U.S. island-hopping campaign crushed Japanese outposts. Saipan fell, then Iwo Jima, then Okinawa. Carrier raids hammered Japan's homeland. Fuel reserves ran critically low. Communication lines were unreliable. The Panama attack plan suddenly seemed less viable, yet Tokyo refused to surrender. Instead, they reassigned the I-400 fleet to a new mission, a mission even more dangerous. By mid-1945, the Panama Plan was abandoned. Japan no longer had the logistical capacity to send submarines across the world. A new target emerged, Ulithi. Located in the Caroline Islands, Ulithi had become one of the largest U.S. naval staging grounds in the Pacific. Hundreds of warships, aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers anchored there between operations. Destroying vessels at Ulithi could disrupt American invasions and morale. Japan's new mission, Operation Hikari, called for the I-400 and I-4012, travel south around Japan, evade American submarines near Formosa, approach Ulithi, undetected launch Seiran bombers in a night raid, target aircraft carriers and ammunition ships, crash into the sea. Afterward, this was effectively a suicide mission. The Seirans were repainted to resemble American planes to confuse enemy spotters. Pilots trained in low-visibility navigation. Crews worked in secrecy, avoiding detection. The submarines departed Japan in late July 1945, but they departed into a war that was already ending. Unbeknownst to them, the United States was preparing to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan's defeat was imminent, but the I-400 fleet did not know this. They only knew their missions, and they pressed onward. The voyage. The submarines sailed thousands of miles under constant threat. American patrol aircraft dominated the skies. U.S. submarines hunted relentlessly. The seas were filled with mines. Yet the giant submarines evaded detection. They moved slowly. They submerged during daylight. They resurfaced only long enough to recharge batteries. Inside the cramped hull, tensions ran high. Pilots slept beside their folded aircraft. Engineers worked tirelessly to maintain engines that had little maintenance support. The crew battled tropical heat, limited ventilation, and dwindling morale. Still, they continued. But as they approached the launch point, a coded radio transmission arrived. Japan had surrendered. The war was over. The mission was cancelled, but the I-400 was still deep in enemy waters. And now they had to surrender to a navy that had no idea such submarines even existed. Their final challenge would be to survive surrender itself. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. The war was over. But deep in the Pacific, the crews of the I-400 and I-401 were stunned. They had spent years training for missions that never launched. They had endured storms, hunger, and fear. They had crossed vast oceans in a submarine unlike any other. Now they had to give up their vessel. Yet surrender was more complicated than raising a white flag. The submarines carried technology Japan did not want falling into enemy hands. So their commanders made a drastic decision: destroy everything. They began dumping sensitive documents, codebooks, maps, and operation plans into the ocean. Some crew members wept openly, years of effort sinking into the deep. Torpedoes were disarmed and thrown overboard. The Seiran aircraft were catapulted into the sea without wings or engines. They scuttled anything that would reveal how advanced the submarine truly was. Then, cautiously, they surfaced and signaled U.S. forces. American sailors were stunned by what they saw. The I-400 was unlike any submarine they had ever encountered. It was enormous, longer than a battleship destroyer escort. Its hangar and catapult were unlike anything in American-design blueprints. The U.S. Navy immediately classified everything. The submarines were ordered to sail under American guard to Sasebo, Japan, then to Hawaii for analysis. Only a small group of American engineers and intelligence officers were informed. The rest of the Pacific Fleet remained unaware. But the Americans were not the only ones interested. The Soviet Union demanded access to the submarines under surrender agreements. The United States refused. This set the stage for one of the most unusual episodes of early Cold War intelligence. By late 1945, the United States realized the Soviet Union intended to claim Japan's advanced submarine designs as part of war reparations. Under international agreements, the Allies were supposed to share captured technology. American naval intelligence was determined to prevent this. The I-400 South and other advanced Japanese submarines, like the I-201 high-speed subs, represented cutting-edge engineering. The U.S. wanted them exclusively. Soviet inspectors were scheduled to arrive in Japan. The Americans needed to act quickly. The U.S. made a decision that would remain classified for decades: move the submarines to Hawaii under secrecy. The Japanese crews were removed. The I-400 and I-401 were sailed by joint American-Japanese skeleton crews to Pearl Harbor, Westlock, the same location where several U.S. ships had mysteriously exploded in 1944. Once there, U.S. engineers studied the submarines intensely. They were stunned by the global range fuel capacity. The aircraft launch system, the hangar design, the hydrodynamic hull shape, the snorkel integration, the double-hull structural strength, the I-400 design influenced early American submarine-launched missile programs. As Soviet representatives approached Pearl Harbor, demanding to inspect the submarines, the U.S. Navy made their final move. They took the submarines to sea and sank them, intentionally, in deep water, far from recovery. This mission was classified for over 50 years. The submarines remained lost until the early 2000s, when deep-sea researchers discovered their wrecks. Only then did the full story begin to resurface. In 2005, nearly 60 years after the war, a team of marine archaeologists using sonar scans located a massive shape resting 2,300 feet beneath the ocean off Oahu. Its size alone indicated it was no ordinary submarine. When cameras descended, the truth emerged. The wreck of the I-401, remarkably preserved. The aircraft hangar remained intact. The catapult was visible. The distinctive bow curvature design to deflect waves was unmistakable. A few years later, the I-400 itself was found. These discoveries reshaped naval historians' understanding of World War II technology. Japan had built submarines decades ahead of their time, with capabilities not matched until the U.S. ballistic missile submarines of the 1960s. Researchers uncovered the complexity of the hangar sealing system, evidence of advanced hydrodynamic design. A propulsion plant more efficient than expected aircraft components scattered around the wreck. The wrecks became underwater. Museums silent reminders of a forgotten era of rapid innovation under desperate circumstances. But more surprising was how close these submarines came to influencing the war. If Japan had completed more I-400s earlier, if resources had not collapsed, if communication had been more stable, if the Panama mission had launched, history might have unfolded differently. Yet the submarine's greatest legacy is not what they did, but what they represented. A level of ambition and engineering far beyond the constraints of wartime scarcity. Today, the I-400 class represents one of the most extraordinary technological leaps of World War II. Though built under duress, they embodied a concept so radical that it would influence naval design for decades. One strategic innovation: Japan understood that long-range power projection was the future of naval warfare. The I-400 was a precursor to submarine-launched cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and stealth strike platforms. 2. Unconventional warfare. The concept of attacking enemy infrastructure from the sea without detection set the stage for modern hybrid warfare. 3. Engineering genius under pressure. The I-400's design showed what engineers can accomplish when pushed to extremes, even with limited resources. 4. A shift in American naval thinking. U.S. engineers incorporated elements of Japanese design into early Cold War submarines. 5. The ultimate unseen war story. The I-400 mission was prepared in secrecy, aborted in silence, transported in secrecy, and destroyed in secrecy. Its story remained hidden beneath classification marks and ocean depths for half a century. Today, the I-400 stands as a reminder that history often hides its most extraordinary stories not in museums, but in forgotten plans, lost technology, and wrecks deep beneath the sea. Japan's underwater aircraft carriers never launched an attack, but the fact that they existed at all is one of the most astonishing untold chapters of World War II.